What's up, everybody? It's Bear with BearIndependent.com, coming to you from Oklahoma's finest outhouse by the light of an AK weapons light. Let's talk about 90 days after SHTF. And this is a preemptive video response to City Prepping, who I've seen a video of his has dropped weeks ago now, I'm sure. SHTF, the first 90 days, or something to that effect. And I haven't watched it. I have no idea what he said, but I'm going to be interested to do some compare and contrast between what he said and what I'm going to say. And it doesn't mean I'm right and he's wrong, or that he's right and I'm wrong. It just means that we have perhaps different viewpoints on the subject, and that's okay, because we can learn from anybody, whether we agree or disagree. So that being said, how do you survive the first 90 days of SHTF? Basics: food, water, shelter, medical, commo, intel, transportation, the basics. Pastor Joe Fox, Viking Preparedness, great YouTube channel, even better Patreon channel, is fond of saying there's two things that are going to get you in SHTF: starvation and people behaving badly. And so if you're in a high population density area, there's a stronger likelihood that your area is going to become embattled. It will become an area of conflict, potentially a war zone. Certain parts of the United States are already war zones. It's not going to get any better in SHTF. Now, here's the thing. We throw this phrase SHTF, when the shit hits the fan, man. We throw that around as if there's a clearly defined delineation between non-SHTF and SHTF. One could argue that we are already on a slow, steady decline as a nation. Additionally, how do you know what SHTF is going to look like? What is it? High altitude nuclear explosion resulting in an EMP, plague, foreign invasion, economic collapse, food scarcity leading to starvation, tyranny, all of the above, none of the above, I don't know. One could argue we're already in SHTF. I think if you do a deep enough dive, we're certainly within, with that rule of law, yeah, we're there. But we're not going to delve too deeply on that. And so what does SHTF look like? I don't know. You don't know. We're all kind of just taking our best guess at what that's going to look like, but it has some characteristics, right? One is certainly a lack of governmental oversight, a lack of peacekeeping, right? Localized, jurisdictional, law enforcement, supply chain issues, can't get anything from the grocery store, fuel shortages, potentially grid down scenarios where there is no electricity, which affects communications, which obviously affects the internet, which affects transportation, because no electricity, fuel doesn't flow, and logistics fall to hell. So those types of things rolled up into SHTF. And there's myriad different ways those types of things can happen. The system is fragile enough that it's not going to take any one massive thing, says me. I think it's going to be more of a slow, steady decline that sooner or later the powers that be will exacerbate for their own interest, which could lead to a black swan event. That being said, first 90 days of SHTF. All right, food. You got 90 days of food. That's not terribly difficult to do. Most people can stock 90 days of food for however many people are in their house without that much effort. And if you've been into preparedness for any length of time, you should already have 90 days of food. Of course, it begs the question, what do you do after 3 months? Well, the deeper your food storage is, the less of an issue that is for you. And then also agriculture, food production. One of the reasons why urban and suburban areas aren't ideal for long-term survival is because your ability to produce food there is limited. Also, when you produce food there, it attracts attention because there's more people there, more people likely behaving badly. So short term, stack 90 days worth of food. Long term, have more food and produce more food. Water, 3 gallons per person per day, minimum 5 is better. It doesn't matter if you hear people say, well, you only need 1 gallon per person per day. That's for drinking. It's not for cooking and for cleaning. It works out to a minimum of 3 gallons per person per day. We do this, so we understand this. It's not a guesstimate. We do this. 3 is okay, 5 is better. You got 5 people in your house times 5 gallons a day, that's 25 gallons times 30 days in a month, that's 750 gallons of water, which is heavy and bulky. It adds up quick. So you can maybe store a month's worth of water in your home, but you need a way to gather water, to recover water. Rainwater catchment is a real thing. You should be catching the rain that falls from the sky. Can you go to the creek, the pond, the stream, the local lake? Yes, you can. Understand that predators hunt at water sources. Happens in the wild. It happens with people as well. Many conflicts have been, one of the defining characteristics of these modern conflicts has been partisan activities where you'll have people sniping at each other as they go to and from waterways. And so you want your water sources as close to possible, preferably redundancy, because storing more than a month's worth of water is going to be a big deal. So for 90 days, you need your water, a month's worth of water storage, and you need a way to replenish it. Long term from there, the more water, the better, okay? Fuel will store in cans for a couple of years. With additives, depends on the climate that you live in. If you have a lot of freeze thaw and humidity which condensates inside the cans, it won't last that long, but you can probably get a year out of it. How much fuel? The more the merrier, but at least enough to make several trips to town, wherever town is, because you may not be going to town, but you are still going to be operational in a certain area, and transportation and logistics are a big deal. If your grown child or your best friend somehow gets word to you that they need help, if you can go help them, are you gonna? Well, it doesn't matter if you don't have fuel to get there. So, fuel. And not just fuel for transportation, but fuel for heating as well. And that's, again, 90 days, relatively easy to do, whether it's propane heat, or firewood, or kerosene, or whatever. But stock fuel. Long term, wood is much more easy to replenish in most areas than propane is, because once the propane stops flowing, logistically, where you're going to get more? You're not. Same thing with gasoline, same thing with diesel, kerosene. Number 2, heating oil. Getting more is going to become an issue. It's getting warm in here. Good job, heater. Security. 90, and here's where I think things start getting interesting. 90 days of security operations. If your security plan is, we're going to get into gunfights, and so we'll be better than the other people we're getting into gunfights with, you've already lost. Because it doesn't matter how good you are, you're still going to experience some rate of attrition, and your group is likely not good enough to be able to survive that rate of attrition over 90 days. Additionally, a casualty is not just somebody who's killed in combat, but somebody who's wounded in combat as well, which gets into medical, which we'll touch on next. But it's a game of attrition, and you've only got so many people, and if you're risking your people to do things that are unnecessary, if you're putting yourself at unnecessary risk because your security plan sucks, you're not going to make it through 90 days anyway. Additionally, I believe, and several others who are learned in the fine arts of preparedness, I believe that after a period of days, call it 90 days, the people who are left are going to be better at operating in that environment, not worse. All of the low-key players, the low-value pieces on the chessboard have already been knocked off the board after 3 months of actual chaos. Who's left are the people who are good at this. And so if you're not good at this, you should be honest with yourself and you should get training, and your first line of defense for security should not be to get into gunfights. Doesn't mean that we're not prepared if we have to, or if somebody else decides, hey, we're going to get into a gunfight. Well, if it becomes a deadly force engagement, the only way you're going to win that is by responding in like kind. Harder, better, faster, stronger, right? Speed, surprise, violence of action. Well, if they surprise you, you can still apply speed and violence of action and potentially win that conflict. But again, there's still rates of attrition here. It's not a video game. It's not a graphic novel. People die. And so when it comes to security, not only is it You can't just hope to win every gunfight that you're going to get in on day 1 through day 90. You need to do far better than that, and that's where most people are falling flat on their face with intelligence and commo. Because if you can avoid the fight, if there's overwhelming force, why engage, right? Why become decisively engaged in a fight you can't win? Because you're not United States Army, United States Marine Corps, right? You're a bunch of preppers somewhere, probably in a cul-de-sac, trying to survive the end of the world as we know it. Do not become decisively engaged unless you can win. That's an entirely different video. But security is not just the ability to get into gunfights, because bullets fly both ways and people will die, whether you want them to or not. And like I said, after 90 days, the people who are left, the pieces who are left on the chessboard are going to be more high-value pieces than low-value pieces, which means your security posture is going to be heightened after 90 days, not decreased, because there may be fewer threats, but they are more significant threats after 90 days. So long-term there, have a network of people now. Have a crew, a team, a mutual assistance group, a community watch, whatever you call it, of capable, trained individuals. Because part of whether or not you are attacked in SHTF is the cost-benefit analysis of the attacker determining whether or not they want to roll the dice based upon that rate of attrition to come take you on. And so if you're good and there's a bunch of you, they may just move past you. See what I mean? Medical. People that have acute medical issues now will very likely die within 90 days. And that sucks, but it's the truth. Anybody who's in a hospital or requires hospitalization will very likely die. Again, getting back to true SHTF, we see this with hurricanes and tornadoes all the time. The hospitals aren't operational because there's no electricity. Or if they are, they're running on backup generation, and only about 10% of the hospital and the staff are at work, and it's basically ICU patients. The ER is closed. There's no OR, there's no operating room unless it's absolutely necessary. 0 elective procedures. And so then there's very rarely life flight or care flight. Not happening. Ambulances aren't running. You have to get yourself to the hospital, and even then it needs to be life-threatening in order for them to admit you. And this is today in the United States of America in a state of emergency after a storm, not an actual grid down scenario or something like that. So my 2 cents, it's going to get worse than that in a true SHTF scenario. And so if you have acute medical issues, you're unfortunately going to die, and that sucks. But it is what it is. Which gets back to the security standpoint. Why are you going to roll the dice and take risks that you don't need to take and get somebody gut shot where they need a surgeon in order to recover from that, but they can't get a surgeon because there are no surgeons? And this is not a prepper novel. You don't get to recruit a special forces medic and an ER doctor as your go-to for your team. This is real life. And if you have some of those, great. They're going to tell you the same thing. Why are we taking unnecessary risk? Because an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Now, flip side of that, stuff is going to happen, right? Stuff happens now in everyday life. And we see the value of having medical equipment and having training. It'll be even more so after SHTF. So post 90 days, yeah, you need medical kits and you need to know how to use them. You need surgical suites if you can, and you need to know how to use them. Well, that flies in the face of what you just said. Yeah, but if I can have a surgical suite, I will. This gets back to rapport and intelligence gathering. If I control the surgical suite, I'm probably going to at least call some shots in my area of operations, right? That gives me some bargaining power when dealing with other people. Because essentially what we're looking at here is neo-feudalism, the rise or the reemergence of fiefdoms, where strong men or women control certain areas of the map, almost like gangs. This territory belongs to the Smith, and this territory belongs to Jones, and this territory over here belongs to Williams, and this territory over here, yada, 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 right? Warlordism, and people don't like that very much because it flies in the face of America and everything we stand for, and yada, yada, yada. Well, if America is collapsing under its own weight in the true SHTF scenario, nature abhors a void, and there will be warlordism. It will happen. And so medical is a great way, A, when you go out into the community to provide medical for people. It's a great way to gather intelligence. It's also a great way to build rapport, which allows you to exert influence, which is good. It comes back to that cost-benefit analysis of, do we want to try and take those people, or are we better off being friendly or at least neutral with those people? Commo. Most preppers, commo sucks. Do better. You know, a couple of Baofangs, it's a start. It's not enough. You need a commo plan in place. All of your frequencies need to be good to go. And there's more to commo than just using radios. There's also signal panels, dead drops, check-ins, coded messages, runners. There's all types of things when it comes to commo, but you need a way to pass information back and forth between your elements. You need to have elements to pass information back and forth between. That gets back to teams, as we were talking about earlier. So pre 90 days, yeah, have a couple of ham radios, know how to use them. Post 90 days, that's the tip of the iceberg, man. It's the absolute tip of the iceberg. Because commo and logistics go hand in hand. If we can't talk to one another, we can't coordinate. If we can't coordinate, logistics are going to fall apart, and logistics is what wins wars. And this is going to look a lot more like warfare, unfortunately, than everyday life. There's a lot of considerations here, and so commo is terribly important. You need to get that squared away on the ASAP. Hand in hand with commo is intelligence and your network. People need to feel comfortable passing you information. You need to be gathering as much information as you can, and you need to take that information and you need to condense it and correlate it into an intelligence package. And somebody on your team or somebody's on your team, this should be their job. Take the data and put it into a package and pass that to the people who need to have that information so they can execute on it, right? It starts now with us having a good area study put together. By the way, I'm completely just shooting from the hip here, other than a few notes on the back of my hand. Subjects. Everything else is shooting from the hip. So you need to have a good area study. Snapshot in time right now of who are the good guys and the bad guys and the strategic targets in our neighborhood. What are our key terrain features? What assets and what liabilities do we have as a group? What are our bug out indicators? So forth and so on. You need to do that now, and that gives you a benchmark to compare everything else that comes after that against it. Did the needle move here in such and such a way? Are there more people over here? Did this power line over here get shut down? What about this water main? Oh, there's people over here who are using this laydown yard for the county public works as a rallying point, a staging point for a thing, and we don't know what it is. It creates the benchmark that you compare everything else against. So you need to do an area study and then have a network that can communicate commo information back to you to compare against that baseline area study to give you daily snapshots as to what's going on in your area of operations. He who controls the information controls the environment. All right? If you're not working from your own intelligence, you will be working from somebody else's intelligence. And post-event, and with our ministry, Grindstone Ministries, we've deployed 24 times in 3 years for disaster relief. We have a feel for what happens post-event. Everybody needs information. Everybody needs information. And so you can develop your own, or you can be at the behest of somebody else to feed it to you. And if you can't verify the information that they are feeding to you, you may be marching to somebody else's tune. Right? So intelligence is incredibly important. If you're going to make it past 90 days, day one of SHTF, if you're going to make it to day 90, you need good intel now so you can make it to 90, and then you need a good network in place post 90 so you can continue to operate, because the threat level goes up after 90, not down. We talked about bad guys after 90 days. It's pretty much what I've got on the subject off of these key facets: food, water, fuel, security, medical, commo, intel, and bad guys after 90 days. I'm interested in your comments down below. I appreciate y'all. Thank you for bearing with the best information with the worst production quality on YouTube. If you're new here, ring the subscribe button, ring the little bell icon. Shout out to all the patrons for supporting the show. We'll see you on the brief. Bless y'all. Shalom.